What's up, y'all? It's from the drummer's perspective. It is Ulysses Owens Jr. How are you doing, everybody? Please make sure you say what's up in the comment section now. Please let me know where you're from, where you're tuning in from. As you see, the setting behind me is a little bit different. I'm in a hotel room, but in a very special place. I'm in our nation's capital. I'm in Washington, D.C., and I'm here because I'm really fortunate to be doing some research at the National Museum of African American History and Culture that has been introduced to the world by the great Smithsonian organization. So I'm here doing some work and some research. So welcome all. Come on in. I'm really excited. Oh, what's up, Grayson? Good to see you, man. I love what you're doing out there, man. A hotel room, that's a drum set for you. I've seen your videos, man. Peter, thanks again for saying hello from Stockholm. Good to see you. And for everybody else, man, I'm so excited about this episode with George. I want to also remind you all, please check out Open Studio. It's an incredible institution at this point, virtually and digitally, and they offer a lot of amazing jazz courses and courses, for multiple instruments. I'm fortunate to have released one course already, Finding Your Beat, which is about 4.5 hours worth of really cool drum material, specifically around jazz. And then this new series I'm really, really excited about. It's about getting the gig. It's really about kind of distilling all of that information that we normally used to seeing in books and what have you, and getting right to the meat, as my grandmother would say, chew the meat, spit out the bones. So we get right to the heart of the matter of what it is that will make you a better drummer and a working drummer. So before we get George in, I want to say what's up to a couple others. Reggie, good to see you again, man. You're regular from Bed-Stuy. My mic is clipping a little bit. Okay, cool. Thank you, Brandon. We got Brandon in the house who just helped me with some technical stuff. What's up from Munich? The mic better now. I think we're good. Cool. All right, y'all. So we're going to bring George on. I want to tell you a little bit about how I got exposed to his playing. It was mainly through an incredible pianist and artist. His name is Monty Alexander, and I started working with Monty Alexander many years ago, and it was really kind of providence because I'd been listening to Monty via a bootleg cassette tape someone had given me from Jacksonville, Florida. And Monty had played the Jacksonville Jazz Festival. And so I got into his playing. And then, fast forward, I started working with Monty. I started touring with him. And there were a couple of times where Monty would ask me to come check out the show so I could really understand how to approach things. Because he had many, different drummers that were playing with him. And George was like the main person. And I remember checking him out. And the first thing I remember saying to myself was, wow, this cat can swing. Like he's like soulful, and then he gets like a really beautiful sound out of the instrument, and really a sound that kind of for me feels like the old school drummers. Like he plays, as Kenny Washington would say, he's playing the drums, which we get that from Papa Joe Jones, like getting right into the center of the tone of the drum and bringing out a really great tone. He's also someone I think that has worked with some of everybody. When I was doing research a few days ago, I started realizing how many legends that he's worked with, and not just jazz legends, but jazz legends that are known for hiring really incredible drummers. And so I'll give you more of that later when we get him on. But I want to say that he's been so supportive of my career. He's also someone I love on Instagram. For those that are into social media, that's kind of becoming our classroom where we're getting a chance to get introduced to a lot of music. And his page is so incredibly positive, but it's full of so much great drum information. And I just love how he shows up in the world as a musician. And to me, I will say it, he is one of the hardest swinging drummers. And Eric Reed is very responsible for having George part of this, because I had such a long list of drummers I was thinking about, and I wanted to make sure that I didn't forget anybody. And so when I was rapping with Eric, he brought up George, and I was like, absolutely, like this is the cat, like I need to have him on here. So anyway, without further ado, please put your hands together for one of the most talented, gifted, consistent, hardworking drummers in the business. Welcome, George FLUDAS.
Wow. Hey, man.
That's all true, brother.
I was listening to everything. And wow, I don't know. I'm very chuffed, as they say in England. Thank you for all that kindness, man. Really,
it's true. I mean, one of the things people, I have to say real quick, people, who ask me about this show, like, how do you pick your guest? There's a couple different, markers, but I'm not going to go into that. But what I will say is, for me, every person that is on this show, I'm a huge fan and I admire. And they also have a long career. Like, I'm not necessarily interested in, people who just started yesterday. I'm interested in people who have been out here longer than me, because this is also a learning process for me.
Yeah,
So
they
you've been
got the
out here
track
longer.
record. Yeah,
Absolutely.
everybody. I mean, like I said, before we went live, I'm very honored that you asked me to do this, because I look at uh, the past interviews that you've done, and it's like, the heaviest of the heavies, man. So
Wow.
I am
Well,
very,
that's
I'm
you.
very honored and humbled to be in that kind of presence. So thanks so much, man.
Well, you're the cat, man. So what I want to do, George, I looked at your, biography. I've known, you for a while, but I kind of want to open this up in a way that's a little bit more fundamental, separate from me knowing you for our audience, right? Because our audience is obviously drummers. We have a lot of repeat listeners and viewers, but I want to kind of expose them for those that this may be their first time checking you out. So give us a little bit of your journey,
Okay.
man. I know you're born in Chicago. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience? And I saw a name as well that I've been hearing for many years with Kurt Elling, and that's the great Von Freeman. So can you tell us a
Yeah.
little bit about that, man?
Yeah, so I came up in a household. My father was a very avid fan of jazz music, of music in general. He actually had very eclectic tastes, but his primary love was jazz, and he came up in the 50s. And he had aspirations to be a drummer. So he started learning how to play, practicing. He was taking some lessons with he actually took some lessons with Walter Perkins for a minute, because at that time, Walter Perkins, who I believe was from Chicago, well, he was living in Chicago, and he was working with Ahmad Jamal's trio. So this is in that time when Vernell was not playing with
Wow.
Ahmad. So my dad was a huge Ahmad Jamal fan and would go see him regularly. And in those days, I guess you could be a teenager and get in,
Hmm.
if you looked the right age, if you looked legal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so at any rate, he had these aspirations to be a player and get on the scene, but that didn't really happen. He ended up it kind of became more of a hobby for him,
Okay. Okay.
so it didn't become his life's work.
Mm-hmm.
But he always had that love of the music and appreciation, which he passed down to me. So from as early as I can remember, I was hearing the music in my household. Like excuse me, my allergies. Damn, it's rough at this time of year.
Yeah. Right.
Um, yeah, so I grew up hearing all the great records from the time I was 4 or 5 years old, and he would sit me down with brushes and in newspaper before he got drums. Like he had sold his drums, and we didn't have drums at that time until I was about 5 years old, and then he ordered a kit. And when he got the kit,
Wow.
I was so excited. I remember going to the drum store with him to pick him up.
Oh wow.
So I mean, I kind of like grew up in this environment already, but it was a home environment. But he
Mm-hmm.
would take me to the jazz showcase, which back then was bringing in, as they always do, the top names in
Mm-hmm.
the field. So I got to see people like Max and Buddy Rich's big band, and
Wow.
Art Blakey and the Messengers with Cedar and Woody Shaw, and I was like 7, 8 years old, and I got to meet Art. My father
Wow.
introduced, just went up to him and started talking to him, and I met him. And Art Blakey was like my hero. I mean, there you go. Boo was my hero from the time I was like 7, 8 years old. I had a
Wow.
picture of him on my bedroom wall.
Wow. Wow.
So there
Wow.
was something about the sound of the music that really drew me to it, and in particular, the sound of the drums and the
Mm-hmm.
great drummers. So um, I think that seed was kind of planted,
Mm-hmm.
by him. And maybe there's just this natural affinity that I had in terms of, the hearing aspect, which eventually, bloomed into, like, I want to do this as my career. Like, I want this is my life. I want to play
Wow.
the drums, and I want to sound good when I play the drums. So that's why I think from a very early age, sound was of like really high degree of importance and priority for me,
Oh, beautiful,
So,
man. I love that. I want to go a little bit deeper into, I interviewed with Matt Wilson last week, and he talked about the same thing that you just did with you here in Boo and what he meant to you. And for Matt, it was Louis Belson. Can you maybe transport me and us back to that moment? You're in the showcase,
yeah.
you're with your pops and you're hearing Art Blakey.
Okay,
Can you take us a walk down memory lane a little bit?
yeah, I know we don't have a lot of time, and I'm known for
Yeah.
getting very verbose, so I'm going to try to.
Okay, cool.
I get criticized.
You got 2 minutes or less, George.
You talk too much.
No,
All right, I'm going to try to like condense this.
Okay.
So really, my main impressions, because I was young, it's not like I remember every detail. What I do remember was the atmosphere of the room being dark. I think of like the lighting, like this reddish orange lighting, and the old showcase and then I know you played at the Jazz Showcase many times. So back then, Joe Siegel had it. It was in the lower level of a discotheque called the Happy Medium. It was on Rush Street, like the real swinging part of Chicago at that time, in the 70s. And I don't remember a whole lot about it. I remember going to those steps and going down into the club. It's a subterranean vibe, it's like the red lighting and everything.
Wow.
And I remember feeling when Blakey was playing, first of all, I was super excited because it was a new hero, but he was a hero, just like a sports hero or something. You know what I mean? Like I had Chicago Cubs on my wall, and I had Art Blakey on my wall.
Oh, wow, that's dope.
It's like seeing a great baseball player or something in person.
Yeah.
I was just like mesmerized. And the sound, it felt in my chest like I was being pummeled, but in a good way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Bass drum.
Wow.
And I had never seen or heard anything like that. So it was like an immediate magnetism. Like I was like, oh man, this is on. And later I found out, like I told Cedar Walton many years later, I was like, I saw you when I was 8 years old
Oh my
at
God.
the Jazz Showcase. He was playing piano with Woody Shaw and Carter Jefferson saxophone. And at that time, I didn't know that. I didn't know who they were.
Right.
I put it together later, But when my father went up to Art on the break, he said, let's go talk to him. My dad was kind of like that. He was just kind of bold. And he went right up to him. And I remember being kind of like behind him, being a little nervous, like, oh man, this is, And he said, hey, young man, and Art was like, have a seat, sit down. He said, you play the drums? And I said, yeah, I do. And I was like nervous and shy. He said, why don't you go on up there and play something? And we were right by the stage and I was petrified.
Oh,
I think I was
God.
like hiding behind my dad.
Yeah.
I was like, no way. And one of Art's sons was there, a little boy. He was probably about my age, actually, maybe a little younger, like 5 or 6. And he was running around the club. And I remember Art saying to him, he was saying, hey, man, get over here. Quit running around, man. And then his kid, he ran up behind the drums. I don't know who that is. To this day, I'm not sure which son. I know Art had many children, so from different, locations and stuff.
Right.
But and at the same time, my dad told me that's Cozy Cole. And Cozy Cole was sitting there and he had sticks and he was playing he was playing on a vinyl chair, like one of the club chairs. And he was just, he was just doing some rudiments and stuff. And I'm like, and I, so yeah, Cozy Cole was in the club.
Man, that's deep. Okay.
So that was like my first time going to a jazz club. Wow. And so, you could see it was a little unusual as a kid. It was like, I was really into it, man. I used to look at the record covers. I would read the liner notes.
Yeah.
And I'm the same, essentially that same spirit. Like Monty Alexander used to say, he said, man, I'm not just a kid at heart who still loves Westerns. And I love the cowboy movies and I love Nat King Cole. And and I was like, I'm still that kid. And, I can relate to that, man. That's me too.
Man, well, I love that. That's a great story. And it's interesting. Cozy Cole, I grew up hearing about him because apparently, Jacksonville had this sort of row of clubs, kind of our little Harlem, an area called La Villa. And apparently he used to play down there at a club called the Five Spot. So it's interesting you
Oh,
mentioned Cozy
wow.
Cole because I would hear about him. But man, I want to
Yeah.
dig into your playing. So you get to see Boo, you get to see Max, all these great drummers. Who hands you? Well, obviously your father played drums, but like when you get that first pair of drumsticks and all of that, like what informs your playing? Because obviously I see like you have the tradition, you play traditional grip, like, so do you learn out of syncopation, do you learn Wilcoxon? Can you give us a little bit of that
A little bit, yeah. A little bit of books, but mostly it was by ear. And
Okay.
in the early days, like at that time, for me, it was like playing with toys. It
Hmm.
was no different. I would play with my toys and I'd play the drums. I'd go sit behind the drums and tap
Hmm.
around on them. I would try to play what I heard on a Blakey record or, you
Okay.
know, Philly Joe, listening to Miles Baggs groove, I'd play along with the
Yeah.
record. But I really wasn't being coached aside from my dad saying, no, you're doing that wrong, or do
Okay.
this, or put the hi-hat there,
Hmm.
or, he showed me the basics. He showed me basic rudiments. He showed me the basics of timekeeping. He had a good feel, I mean, he had a really nice swing and feel. He didn't have like
Okay.
the greatest chops in the world.
Mhm.
But again, that's another thing that for me is like paramount is sound and feel. So,
Yeah.
lately I've been saying this a lot, like when I did social media and this whole
Yeah.
scene, it's like, I said sound and feel, because to
Yeah.
me, those are the most important, really the most important elements in, at least in a
I
drummer's,
love that.
um, toolbox.
Yeah.
Having a good sound and a good feel. It almost doesn't matter if you can't play rudiments, if you can't,
Hmm.
play all kinds of technically demanding polyrhythmic stuff,
Yeah.
independence. But if you have a good sound and you have a
Yep.
good feel, you're going to work. You're going to get gigs. People are going to like playing with you, and
Yep.
that's really, I mean, I know you're doing this thing related to the working musician,
Hmm.
you know, and trying to raise awareness about what is
Hmm.
necessary aside from just being super into the music and
Hmm.
practicing. There's like a lot of stuff out here to
Hmm.
navigate once you really want to become an active working musician. The business aspects,
Right.
relationships, communication with people, learning music. But yeah, man, if you have a good sound and good feel, you really can't go wrong if that's I'm not saying that's the only thing you should strive for. I'm just saying that needs to be like the meat, you know.
Yeah. I mean, I
That
agree. I
needs
agree. Oh no,
unless
after you,
you're a
George. I'm
vegetarian,
sorry.
unless you're a
Yeah, right,
vegetarian.
right. But I agree with you because oftentimes I ask my students, or when I give master classes or play or whatever, I always ask people what is the primary reason that the drums exist in music. And and I hear people say this and that and whatever, and I say because we are meant to be the timekeeper, and that is across genres. So whether you're rock drummer or
Mhm.
reggae or jazz or whatever. So to your point about sound and feel, I absolutely agree, and I think that where we've kind of gotten to is that we're getting into more of the technical aspect of chops, and we all think about that, but to your point, uh sound and feel is what's going to allow us to be, and I don't like this thing of like, oh, it's going to let you work because everybody wants to work and make money, but it's more of, I think it will allow you to be able to collaborate with more musicians,
Right.
to your point.
Right.
So
Yeah,
um
absolutely. Well,
what
yeah, and they will enjoy
right,
playing with you, you
right,
know.
right.
Um, but sorry, I strayed a little bit
No,
off
it's
on
okay.
on the tangent, but when you said something about handing the drumsticks,
Yeah,
Art Blakey gave me a pair of drumsticks that night,
please
and he
tell me you
said,
have those still, George.
"I have one," and I broke. That's what kids do, man. Kids do dumb shit.
your
They
your
like,
father should have immediately took those sticks from you.
and you know what? They were in the bag for a long time. They
Yeah,
were a prized possession. I kept them in
yeah.
the bag. They were Gretsch 1A, Art Blakey signature model in the Gretsch bag. But then when I got older, I just used them. I just started playing them. It's like, to me, they were just another pair of sticks at some point, and I cracked one of them. And then I was like, oh shit, now I did it, you know. So
Wow.
I have the other one, but
Okay,
it's all,
great.
but when he handed me the sticks, he reached down to his bag. He said, I want to give you a pair of sticks. And he pulls out a pair of sticks that was all cut up. And he's about to hand them to me. And I remember this stuff really clearly. Like I felt like, wow, these are actually, you know, marked up by Art Blakey. And then he pulled them back and he goes, no, let me give you a fresh pair. And then he put those back and he gives me this pair in the bag. And I remember feeling a little disappointed. Like,
Wow.
well, I wish I had, you know.
Wow. Well, man, speaking of that, George, I want to ask you, growing up in Chicago, you talk about, you know, with drumsticks and all that. Were there any special drum shops? I was thinking about that this morning
Yes.
when I was talking to you. I was like, I wonder
man.
if he found any cool
Well,
shops. Like,
I was on the tail end of Frank's Drum Shop and Drums
right.
Limited,
Okay.
which for a while was called Drums Unlimited. But Drums Limited and Frank's Drum Shop were like the two go-tos. They were like the modern drum shop in New York and Drummers World, I guess. You know,
Wow.
in Manhattan, you had those couple shops. Frank and Maury LaShawn, they ran Frank's Drum Shop. And that was an old school shop. And they had the old school teachers there. And, you know, they had the old K's and the old A's lined up in wood boxes, you know, all these beautiful symbols. But, yeah, and then late. So that actually lasted into high school. So I was kind of like a regular, you know, like when I was in high school. Those were great old fashioned shops. And then later there was the Drum Pad, which you may know about Vic. I don't know if you know about Vic's Drum Shop in Chicago, a guy named Vic Salazar.
No, so the only shops I've heard of, which were, you know, much later, is the Maxwell stuff. You know, Maxwell shop. But
the vintage stuff.
But none of I haven't heard of any of these spots.
Yeah. Well, like the legendary spots are Frank's and Drums Limited, and that's where my dad had ordered the kit.
Okay.
The Gretsch kit. You know, my dad was a big Chico Hamilton fanatic too at that time. Well, he always was, and so the kit that he got was a 22-12-14. But the 22 was a 22-12, not a 22-14, like Chico played, you know.
Wow.
So, and that was a kit that I actually started to play on, you know, started to learn on. Like I said, he showed me basics, but until like in the early days, I didn't take it real seriously. It wasn't like I had a practice schedule. I wasn't studying privately with someone. You know what I mean? It was more like it was something fun to do. And then when I got to be about 11 or 12 years old, that's when I really started to like get serious about it, like practicing for hours a day, listening to the records and trying to take off what I heard. Okay. More of that kind of thing. You know, and then I got into high school and I was in the music program in high school, but that was orchestral and band stuff. So I did that through high school. And my high school, Lane Tech, had a really great band and orchestra. I mean, they were like an award-winning music program. Okay. So that was cool, you know, but I still never had any formal instruction throughout high school either. It was all just like, I mean, when it came to playing whatever I was into rock and roll too. So, you know, I was like listening to rock albums and taking off stuff from Rush and Led Zeppelin and the Police and all that, and Hendrix and, you know, all that stuff that I liked, simultaneous with jazz, you know, listening to Max and Philly Joe and Miles. But my dad was the one who was always inspiring me because he had a really great memory too. So he would tell me about seeing, you know, and so much of this, I feel like, you know, now it's there always was an academic aspect to the music, I think, since the 40s. You know, a lot of cats were going to school, learning in school, coming out with degrees in composition, Donald Byrd, for example, you know, but it's so much more of a cultural and oral tradition and a folk tradition, you know, and I'm fortunate, I feel, to be on, I don't want to say the tail end, because I think what we're all doing, I think a lot of people are still doing this. There's still this folk aspect to it. Absolutely. You know, and it has to be there, you know, inspiration through mentoring and apprenticeship and, you know, all of that, not just school, not just books. Right. So, but yeah, like at that time, you know, my dad was my link to the past, because he would say, yeah, I saw Train and Miles at the Sutherland, and Philly Joe came in and he was late, and he was wearing, and I remember these stories, he was like, he was wearing this really slick suit, but he didn't have any socks on. And he said he was wearing brown Jodhpur boots, and that was like, everybody was like, that was the rage. And my dad was hanging out with people who were hip to clothes and the style aspect. Like, yeah, man, he's wearing those Jodhpur boots. We got to get some Jodhpurs, riding boots. But he said Philly Joe had riding boots on, but no socks. And he said he proceeded to play his ass off. He was just like, just on fire. And he said Miles was standing behind him most of the time, laughing, like smiling and talking to him while he was playing.
Wow.
Oh, that's beautiful. Same thing with Max. He would tell me these stories about seeing Max, Max come out, play a tempo like this. First tune, then the second tune is maybe a little slower. All got skill and got rhythm. And, So, when you hear stories like that from, it's just like us, man, when we're playing with people and Ray Brown would tell a story, or even, Christian tells a story, right?
Right.
And it's coming from Ray Brown, which is coming from Dizzy. Right. There's a lineage, there's a history, and it's like a passing down of all of this information and humor. It's culture, So that was I wasn't self-conscious about it. I mean, I just was sort of like taking it all in. But the older I got, I realized that was such a valuable thing to have a parent, because that was at home. It wasn't like I had to go to school, and it was every day. I mean, like this album was on regularly.
Man, that's special.
We'd be cooking, and it's like Lester Young, Man. So I'm like memorizing solos as a kid, just like anything as a child, you absorb things quickly.
Well, and I kind of, that's where I wanted to go next, George, before we get into obviously the career and stuff. One of the things that is very apparent to me when I watch you play, and even the video I posted for those that follow both of us on Instagram. If you don't follow us, you got to check out what we're putting out there. But when you transcribe different things, it's so apparent how much music you've listened to, and that feeling, right, George? Like when you watch a drummer and you're like, that drummer has checked out stuff. How did you, because I get the question oftentimes from students, they're like, how do I listen to music? And I think that we have lost, to your point, because of the oral tradition, kind of, the masters are leaving us more and more. And then now we've got all this digital stuff. So this ability for us to transfer information from person to person, especially in person, is starting to become kind of a lost art. With all that said, how have you learned how to listen to music, transcribe, and what are some tips that you can give our audience on how maybe they can better listen, because the tradition is so embedded in your playing, and I know that has only come from your ability to listen and decipher things.
Well, thanks for that. I appreciate that. I'm probably not the best person to give advice on transcribing, and I say that because I pretty much never wrote anything down. Yeah. Like when I listen to and learn bits of solos, I mean, I think it's really important to transcribe because you're learning the language, you're learning to speak the language. And it's really important to actually get down to the nitty gritty, into the details. And as a drummer, I think drummers have an extra, it can be confounding, because we have this extra difficulty in sorting out, how did they stick that? There's so many possibilities for sticking.
That's true.
And I was actually in a conversation just a couple of days ago with Dan Weiss. We've been talking a lot. Yeah, we've been chopping it up a lot lately. And we were talking about Philly Joe and some of these stickings, and like, Kelly at Midnight, this iconic recording of Philly Joe. And man, it's like a wellspring of ideas and vocabulary that you can adapt to your own way of playing it. The phrase might be 9 strokes, but is it, right, left, left, right, right, left, right, left, left, or is it, any other possible combination of stickings? So when it comes to transcribing, it's funny, I almost don't use that word because I don't write it out.
So what do you call it then?
Memorization. you know.
Because see, I've heard it as oral transcribing, but that's interesting. You call it.
That's cool. That's cool.
Okay.
That's why I said I feel like I'm not even an authority to speak on it.
No, but I mean, clearly yes, you are, because it's in the hands.
Well,
So,
it's in the hands and it's in the head. Like if you can sing it, that's a big start, you know? So like often when I'm listening, a lot of the stuff that I have heard over the years, it's almost like what my old band teacher used to call osmosis, you know, it sinks in. But just because it's sunk in doesn't mean that you're going to be able to play it right. Then you've got to get to work. You know, you got to get to work in expressing it and then making it sound musical and not clinical. Because there's the clinical moment. You know, there's the time where you're getting it together and it sounds like it's something you're working on. Okay. But to get it to where it actually sounds like music, that's the extra. That's the last step of refinement. Mm-hmm. So, you know, my goal is never to play what a cat played on a record note for note. Mm. You know, I don't want to do that really. Even though I know I do it, I know I'm using big chunks of Max and Philly and AT and all these heroes of mine. It's to put it, like Herbie said, you put it in the funnel and your personality comes out the other end.
Wow, that's
powerful.
Know?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, that when you put it into the funnel, that's where this process of assimilation takes place. So you absorb it, then you have to assimilate it, then you express it. So let me just, you know, say I'm not an innovator. I don't claim any ownership over this language. The language was gifted to us. You know, Phil Woods once told me, Dizzy told him that. He said, man, you know, no one owns this music. This is a gift and it's been handed down. And he said, and we're handing it to you. This Phil Woods told me this, and it was deep, man. And Phil said this to me, and he said, you know, Dizzy said it's a gift, but treat it with care and respect.
Wow.
You know, I mean, that was probably his addition. I don't know if Dizzy said that. But you know, that's where it's at. I mean, like, we have such a vast wealth of information and beautiful art that's been created and put out there by Sonny Rollins, by all of our favorites, up until contemporary masters right now. You know, so the process for me is to assimilate it, but not just merely replicate. Right. You know, you remember when Hutch was talking about the replication thing? Copy. Yeah. You know, my man.
We love Hutch.
I mean, we all love Hutch, you know. Yeah. And he's right. I mean, you know, essentially, you know, and there's so many paths to it. You know, and you don't have to be like so dogmatic as to say, you know, there's only this way and you can only transcribe, you got to write it out, and the sticking has to be just like. That's what's beautiful about it is like your interpretation of this incredible phrase or this incredible solo or set of fours is what's important to keep furthering the tradition.
And to your point too, George, I think what's even more important is that people are checking this music out, right? And so I love that you talked about it's your interpretation. I want to bring up a comment that one of the viewers mentioned is Pickenstone, who's been with us definitely the last few episodes. So I'm glad to see you again. But they say a lot of people talk about transcribing without writing it down helps you focus on the sound more. Writing it down seems to help with sight reading those rhythms after. So I've heard, and I want you to answer that as well. And I'll say from my experience, I never forget for my senior recital at Juilliard, Billy Drummond had me play a transcription from Max Roach, Drum Also Waltzes. And I remember, you know, when Billy first gave me the assignment, I was like, Billy, I'm not going to read it. Like, I'm just going to learn it. And I did. I learned it by ear, you know, memorization, as you would say. But then I went to the music to make sure that I got kind of the organization of his ideas. So I'm like you, I'm not a person that's going to write it down. I mean, all the stuff I've transcribed is just memorizing. Because for me, when I hear it, it then for me goes into the ears, and then it, to your point, gets into the playing. So I think my question before we move on What do you think about that comparison? Would you say that, for the person who has that book of, especially horn players do this a lot, and pianists, do you think that there's a disconnect with those that kind of meet the transcription from the visual standpoint?
I don't know, disconnect. I don't know if I would say a disconnect. I would say that some people are visual learners, some are oral learners.
Right.
Primarily,
Right.
I'm definitely the guy who learns by memory
Same.
and by ear more than like reading. But
Yeah.
I found that it was like I wanted to get that together a little better because my reading was never really that good until I started playing with a big band. So for me, it was like I welcomed it. And I actually really like what you just said, because I have another friend who was talking about Philly Joe transcriptions. And there's a book, apparently, I think it's written by maybe a Danish or Scandinavian guy.
Okay.
But it's supposed to be like the bomb for Philly Joe. It's like all these transcriptions. Yeah.
Okay.
It's like called the Philly Joe book or something. Okay. And anyway, my friend was telling me about this book and how he really found it as a useful aid in sort of supplementing or enhancing his knowledge about a particular transcription, just like what you did. So it's like, you learn it, but then you go back and fact check,
Right.
But that's where the thing for me gets tricky is like, what are you fact checking? Did Philly write this? Did someone see him play it? Because if you didn't see him play it, and I'm going to get loud now, you don't know how he sticked it.
That's true.
You know what I'm saying?
That's true.
A lot of cats get dogmatic about this stuff.
That's true.
No, man, it was definitely, it was.
Right.
It's like the same phrase, but it's sticking a different way.
Right.
I don't know. You got to see a video to know how he's sticking it.
But even then, in the spirit of jazz, sorry, to your point, Philly could have done it differently every time to your,
Right. That, and I think he did. Speaking of that specifically, I think Philly was such an in-the-moment player and had such mastery of the rudimental language, which comes out of Wilcoxon, that he was just, he's master. It's masterful work. Some cats have their kind of go-tos in their vocabulary.
Right.
And Philly definitely had his. But he had an arsenal, man. Like we think about like the drummers and what kind of arsenal they had. Let's say, what they had at their disposal. Philly had some serious variety at his disposal. Buddy Rich had serious. I think Philly really loved Buddy in terms of this.
Yeah.
The cymbal thing, the rides thing, that's a whole other beast. Yeah. But I mean, just in terms of hands on a snare drum, man, you can't mess with Buddy Rich. You can't mess with Philly. You can't mess with. That's why Philly was in Buddy Rich's band, so he could learn the charts.
Hold on. I didn't know this. You gotta tell us this. It's hot off the press.
Buddy Rich, Buddy Rich would hire Philly Joe to play the charts, especially charts that he did, that he was unfamiliar with, and he would watch Buddy. I mean, he would watch Philly Joe and memorize them quickly. Because Buddy had almost a photographic memory. So he could just see Philly Joe play this chart once or twice and be like, okay, I got it. And he loved Philly Joe. He loved.
Do you know what era this was, George?
Probably 50s. I'm not sure though. But it had to be 50s. Wash knows about this.
This makes so much sense because I'm Buddy was the first jazz drummer I ever heard. And I don't want to deviate too much because I want to get to some of the gems and things you see.
This is I'm telling you. This
but no. But I love this. I love it. But anyway, Buddy was the first jazz drummer I heard. But this makes so much sense to me because I heard Buddy, and then later on when I was 16, I got into Philly Joe, and it was such an easy transition to me because Buddy was all about technique and hands. Philly had all that, but it was very much steeped in the swing tradition. So this is very interesting to me because I feel like the way Buddy approached big band and setting things up, you could hear some of that influence.
Yeah, for sure.
So that makes
and
a
you
lot
can
of sense.
hear some, and I don't, I mean, I'm not saying it's an exchange, and that's what I mean. This whole thing about a gift, these cats, for sure, Philly was looking at Buddy going, okay, man, I got, all right.
right.
So they were borrowing from each other.
Absolutely.
No question. I mean, no question in my mind. And Shadow is someone that people don't really talk about a lot, and there aren't as many recordings of him. But I think Shadow was right in there too with the hands.
But to your point, I think like I think there may have been like a Monk record. But maybe you can give us. Can you maybe give us a couple of records to check out Shadow's playing? Because I have not gotten into it as much.
Well,
and we're talking about Shadow Wilson.
Yeah, Shadow Wilson. There's a couple Sonny Stitt records with Hank Jones, and I think the bass player is Wendell Marshall. Sonny Stitt and the New Yorkers, and that's great because the fidelity is really good. There's some recordings of Shadow that the fidelity is not so great, like playing with Basie, like Queer Street, which I did a video recently of this legendary drum break on Queer Street.
Wow.
There's a legendary 2-bar drum break that Shadow Wilson plays. And Buddy Rich called it the greatest drum break in history. So
wow. We gotta play that before we
Well, and when I met Wash, and started talking to him a long time ago, we was talking about, man, you gotta listen to Shadow Wilson, man. Check out that drum break he plays on Queer Street, man. That's forget about it, And I was like, oh, okay. So I didn't know about Queer Street, Count Basie. But Shadow played with Basie's band for a little while after Joe Jones in around 46, right after the war, like 46, somewhere in there. But anyway, Shadow Wilson on, of course, the Monk record, with Train.
Yep.
And also the live concert with Train. What's that, from Town Hall, I think it is?
Yeah. Okay. Town Hall. Okay.
Or is it Carnegie Hall? I can't remember if it's Carnegie Hall or Town Hall. I think it's Carnegie Hall. Yeah. Okay. The Thelonious Monk and John Coltrane live, where they play Epistrophe.
Yeah.
And oh man, that's great, Shadow Wilson.
So we got to pull. So Rachel, and for those that don't know, Rachel is behind the scenes helping us with all this. George, can you give her the record for that? I would love it if we could play that before we end the episode. The Shadow Wilson.
Queer Street. It's called Queer Street. Queer as in strange. And Street, 1946, I think, Count Basie.
Great.
And I'll tell you where the break is. It's right at about 2 minutes. It's right at about 2 minutes, 30 something seconds, because I did a video on it and I remember.
Okay. Great. So while she's finding that, I want to fire into your career. We also got some questions as well. Maybe I'll start with this. Jonathan Han ask, how do you get started on into the jazz scene as a drummer? Is it via jam sessions? What if you don't know every standard that will be called? And I think this question helps kind of get us into your career, because I know you particularly not only are always working, but you have been getting called for years by the legends. So can you maybe sort of answer Jonathan's question and kind of give us more of your journey?
So I say hey to Jonathan. I know Jonathan.
Oh, cool.
Hey,
right.
Yeah. Well, let me try to make this brief because I talk too much.
No, man, it's killing.
When I got out of, I was in college and I started to like meet some musicians and jam. Like Jesse Davis was one. Jesse Davis lived in Chicago, the great alto player. Yeah. And so we became friends early on. John Weber, the great bass player. He was from Chicago, and so we kind of connected and we started jamming together. Then we started trying to, how it is, you try to get like little gigs here and there, a coffee shop or whatever. You're a student, You were at Juilliard, right? Mm-hmm. So you were in New York. You're like in the mecca of the music. So it's different for everybody, Mm-hmm. But I would say, it's really important to get with other musicians who are interested in playing, of course, and not just stay within the confines of the school, but try to get outside the school. And whether it's a weekly jam session, I think you said you're hosting something, right? Or
I was hosting something? Yeah, I was hosting something every Sunday.
That's really important. Yeah. I mean, that's really important because in those situations, those are like the little cauldrons where, things get cooked up. Like you learn how to play in the moment, and hopefully no one's, they're not putting a whole bunch of charts in front of you.
Yeah.
It's like,
we're hitting. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's just play, let's play a blues. Let's play rhythm. Let's play like these standard forms. To me, those are like nuts and bolts basics. I mean, you listen to any record, any bebop record, it's blues, rhythm, maybe some other standards, and popular songs of the day. But now we're in a totally different era. The popular songs of today aren't Gershwin tunes and Jerome Kern and all that stuff. So, it gets a little bit like we got to stay relevant now.
Yeah.
So it depends on what you want to do. Like if you want to play this music out of the tradition, you have to find those opportunities because it's just not part of common culture anymore. Like when I was coming up, I would go to Von Freeman's jam session, and I met Von, and I knew people who were playing with Von. So they invited me, "Oh, you play drums? Come on up, man." Next thing you know, you're playing with Von Freeman. Wow. What an honor, right? It's an incredible honor. It's also like what a learning experience.
Right.
And it just happened. It's not like you registered for school and you're planning on this thing. And this is like, I just registered for the greatest school I could ever get into, and I didn't even know it. Yeah. And it's because of the generosity of people like Vaughn or John Young or Jody Christian or Lynn Halliday, a lot of these musicians that I came up, kind of like apprenticing with. So one thing leads to another. If they like how you play, they say, "Hey, I'm going to hire you. What are you doing next Thursday night?" Say, "Oh, I'm gonna." And so for me, it was a very kind of organic, I guess, process.
Right.
But the generation is different now.
Yeah.
It's a different world.
Did you make a conscious decision, George, of wanting to be a quote unquote traditionalist? Like as I look at the list of people, Betty Carter, Bobby Hutcherson, Phil Woods, Hank
Betty
Jones.
Carter was only 2 weeks.
hey, you got to play with her, so it could have been one day.
Yes,
Hank, Tommy Flanagan, Johnny Griff. We talked about Monty and Cedar. What was it? Was it a conscious decision to say I want to play like with the cats that swing? Like, was that okay?
Yeah, for the most part. Okay. I mean, and that's a funny thing. It's like if I was coming up now, I don't know what I would do because Tommy's gone. Art Farmer's gone. Cedar's gone, sadly. I mean, so many of these cats that I aspired. See, when I'm a bit older than you, I'm not sure how much older, but you're still of that generation that's like you were hungry to play with the cats when you were in college, right? I know you were.
Yeah.
And so was I. So was everybody. Everybody wanted to get a gig.
Right.
You didn't want, it wasn't only about like, I want to get my album put out and get it available for download as soon as possible.
Wow. I didn't know that.
Man, I mean, there were some people like Ron Blake, who's a very good friend of mine from back when he was at Northwestern and I was just kicking around. I had stopped going to Roosevelt. I started gigging, So Ron and I were playing together trio with the bass player here, Dennis Carroll, and we were all like, Ron didn't make a record. The first thing on his mind was that, man, I got to make a record and then I got to promote myself and get my website together. There was no websites, but you know what I mean? Same with me. I wasn't going, man, I'm going to make a record with Bobby Broom and Ron Blake and I'm going to market it. And I'm going to get some headshots. I mean, look at this lighting. Jesus Christ. It's terrible. But I mean, especially at that time, it was like the furthest thing from my mind. And maybe that's not good. I don't want to be that old guy who says, this is the way you're supposed to do it. And it's not, we live in a different era. We live in the cyber age. I mean, the digital age. People market themselves now right before college. They're in high school. Absolutely. And they're already like they gotta, it's like they're branding themselves. Absolutely. And that's cool. I mean, it's where the world is. Right. But for me, if I were coming up now, I don't know what I would do. Maybe I would be that cat who was like recording my own album and trying to, be viable in that respect. But back then, it was all about like Ron wanted to get a gig, and what did Ron do? He moved to New York. He started working with Art Farmer. Right. He started working with Roy Haynes.
Whoa.
Heroes. We set up our heroes. My heroes were everybody. Everybody's my hero back then.
Yeah.
So I'm like, damn, I'm fine getting a gig with any of these cats. So Johnny Griffin Kenny
Yeah.
Washington said, "Man, I can't make this gig. I told Griffin, but I just love imitating.
You do a great Kenny Washington.
But can you imagine, man? I was like 20
Yeah.
years old. I was like a combination of scared, stiff, not stiff,
Yeah.
but I was scared,
Yeah.
and I was like flattered. I was like, wow, I'm
Wow.
gonna get to play with Johnny Griffin. Like that's
Yeah.
what was on my radar.
So because we got only 10 minutes left, I gotta
Yeah.
get some other stuff in there.
Okay.
Ray Brown. What did you learn? Pickenstone, or no, excuse me, Jules Monin asked about that. So whatever you can give us, man.
How was it the
Ray.
first time playing with him? Man,
Yes.
Man, it was okay. So that's the big boss. Ray Brown was the big boss. Ray was larger than life. His playing, his personality. The first time I played with him was auditioning at the showcase. It was between, how they have a matinee on Sundays. Yeah. So it was like between the matinee and the evening set, and Kareem Riggins was playing in the band. Woo. And Kareem had called me and said, man, I'm leaving the band. Ray wants to hear you. It was like that. And I was like, oh, okay. So I had enough experience where I wasn't completely frightened about meeting Ray Brown. Yeah. But, Ray Brown was like an extra level of like heaviness, seriousness, for me. Yeah. So, but it was cool. We just started playing. We started playing Yesterdays, and it was swinging. It was like, yeah, man, swinging. He said something like that. He said, all right. He's like, well, so we'll be in touch. I'm going to get you some tapes. I mean, it was literally one song.
Wow.
And he gave me all these tapes. They were DAT tapes. Remember DAT tapes?
Yeah, DAT machines. Wow.
He gave me a bunch of DAT tapes with a DAT machine. I didn't have a DAT machine. And it was 2 different full weeks. It was 1 week was with Hutch, recordings, from some club with Hutch, Yoshi's, I think it was. And then the other one was recent recordings with Jeff Keezer and Kareem. And at that time, Keezer was already out of the band. It was Larry Fuller was playing piano. So I had to learn about 80 songs, I would say, by memory. And so, in other words, the way Ray had it set up was like he didn't like to repeat songs, if possible, during a week's run. Okay. So you play like a Tuesday through Sunday, 5-night run. He wanted to play different songs every night.
Wow. So not even like the same first set every night. It was like every first set was different. Wow. Usually
he might have the same opener. Like he liked to have Buena Buena as an opener. So we would, certain tunes would be in there. Like he might play Mona Lisa, one of his bass features, But by and large, man, he liked to really have different sets every night. He said, he said, this goes back to Oscar. He said, Oscar, we didn't like to repeat songs. If we're playing at the London House for a week, you got to play different shit. It's like,
wow.
So he said we had close to 300 arrangements with Oscar. That's what he said. I was like,
but it makes sense when you look at all the records and stuff they made and all that.
Yeah. So and a lot of it evolved. Like while they were playing, a lot of it just evolved. Nothing was written out. It was all just learning the tunes by memory,
What was the greatest thing he taught you, George, about the drums? Like, was there ever, because here's a guy who's played with all the greatest drummers and also even our modern, our friends, Kareem and all those guys, Hutch.
Yes.
So was there anything he ever was specific about that kind of maybe blew your mind or changed your approach?
Man, again, it's like we don't have that much time, but I think one of the most essential things was thinking about the drums as a complete instrument and not just like in his trio. His trio was kind of like he conceptualized it as a big band, like with the shouts and featuring the drums, and there was a lot of different sections to each song. So he wanted the drums to be more than just like, he wanted it had to always be swinging, but you had to contribute something to the music too. Wow. It wasn't just, keep time for the trio and the piano player is doing all the pyrotechnics. So he was really sensitive to like, how how do I put this? Like almost like non-essential or extraneous, cute kind of stuff. Like he really didn't like it when you played some flashy stuff that had no real substance.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
He didn't dig that, and he'd let you know. He'd go too cute. He'd go too cute.
No, okay, yo, this is crazy because McBride does the same. He would do the same thing. Yeah, because I would do. He was like, all right, I hear you trying to be hip, and or I'd be trying to digging. He like, all right, get down. All right, get down. I hear you. Cute. And then to your point, I would do like some little flashy brush stuff. Yeah, and that's where it sounds like Ray because he'd be like, oh, you're getting cute. Getting cute now.
Totally.
That's kind of like reining you in.
Yeah. But,
wow, that's deep.
Yeah, man. But it was always like with Ray, I felt like you had to be so focused, laser focused all the time on every beat. Wow. Like every note was meaningful. Wow. And that's how he played the bass. It was like every single note he played. Because, when you're set up next to him, I don't know if Christian sets up this way. I don't remember. But, Ray's bass was right next to me.
Yeah, same. He was to the Christian was to the right and the piano, so we kind of did kind of a triangle kind of,
Oh, well, this was the opposite. This was
so you guys did
Oscar setup. Like
with the Oh man, so you were really close
to the hi-hat, and Ray liked it because he said, "Man, I can direct traffic from here." And he did. But what I loved about it is the finger is right next to me. And I can not only hear him, the acoustic property of the instrument, I could see it. Okay. So I used to often just like get off on watching him play because it's just the best seat in the house, and his note choices. I mean, Ray Brown, who has better note choices?
Right.
Ron Carter. Like you said, the masters of the note choice.
Wow.
And every single note had meaning. And that's what I really learned with Ray was like, don't phone in even a half of a bar. Be present for every single measure of every song, if you can. I mean, I know sometimes it's hard, man. We all have life distractions and things going on. But to really be present and be in the moment for every song and put that meaningful intention in everything you do. And honestly, that's when I heard you play, that's what I hear. I hear a lot of intention in the way you play.
You're very kind, man. So I gotta, because I want to get some music in. I'm gonna close with actually one last question from one of our viewers, again Pickenstone, and he asked, "How do you change your approach on the drums depending on if you're playing with piano, organ, or just with horn or bass?" And in terms of, I know he's talking about orchestration, which is a little bit, as you and I both know, it's a little bit different because one is sort of setup and sonic setup, and then the other is kind of phrasing. But any kind of way you want to answer that kind of briefly so we can we got to play some of your music out here.
Yeah, it really depends. It just depends on the style of the player too. Like some organ players play busy, some don't. Some pianists leave space. They voice, they're more open voiced kind of players. Some are more crunchy and dense, play a lot. It really just depends. I feel like I don't have a set prescribed default for, guitar trio versus piano trio versus sextet. Mm-hmm. The most important thing is to really listen to who you're playing with, the way they're playing, the density of the music, tone, even just their sound, and try to complement it as best. That's all I try to do, man. I just try to complement it as best as I can.
Well, man, first of all, George, I was thinking the whole time you were talking, I'm like, man, I got to get him back. I mean, I admire you so much, and this conversation has helped me to understand even how much more substance is to you and to your playing.
Oh, man.
No, seriously, man. I have to ask for one last piece of advice, and then we're going to play a little bit of the drum break and then some of your stuff. Was there anything from, whether it's Hank Jones or any of the other Griff, anybody told you that kind of shapes how you show up on the drums? Like, just so your whole philosophy, was there anything someone gave you that was like, okay, you know what, this informs how I do what I do?
I don't know if I can point to any one thing that was said. It's more about what was felt on the bandstand. Like Tommy Flanagan, for example, he really didn't say a whole lot. A lot of cats don't talk much about like what they want you to do or what you shouldn't do, all that kind of stuff. But they give you a look, or they give you, or you get a vibe. Like even if they pause, and then like I remember playing with Tommy one time, and I did something, tried to do something, and it didn't come off, or it was too cute, or whatever. And Tommy just paused real quick, and he just went like this. And I remember, man, that spoke so many volumes. You know what I mean? It was like, it was a mature. That was a match. That was a moment to mature. It was like, okay, don't do that again. And not only don't do that again, but think about like why did you do that? Like, why would you do that? I remember Cedar kind of doing the opposite. Like I remember feeling kind of insecure. Like I said, man, sometimes I just playing these tunes, and I said, I got to tell you, being in this chair, this is like Higgins was here. Like I don't belong here. And he goes, no, man, don't think of it like that. He said, you contribute what you have to offer, and he said something like that. But the way he said it, it was so like it was so straightforward, and it was just like, just be yourself. Don't compare yourself to anybody in the past. He said, just be yourself. And I think about like these cats, like when he joined Blakey, was he thinking about Horace Silver?
Right.
You know what I mean? And he was 21 years old or whatever. So we're all human beings, man. We all go through these feelings of self-doubt and but one thing I did want to say real quick was, and I just wrote something down. So, there's just a couple things. I think drummers really need to listen to soloists and not just drummers, and take some of that language, take a lot of their language and phrasing and expression from other solos. So that's why I've been doing a lot of this lately, where I just might post, playing along with something, but I'm playing solo, playing like a Sonny Rollins solo, or playing a Miles solo, because I think drummers too often, especially in the academics scene, are taught to focus on learning, transcribing drums, drum solos, drum phrases, drum licks, drum rudiments, but they're not really getting the language of the music in totality, because they're not paying attention to the soloists, to the instrumentalists. And I'm not saying you have to memorize a Bud Powell solo note for note, but just at least, glean from these from Bird, from, all the creators of the language, so that you have some of that in your hands and in your mind and in your heart, that you love the music, not just the drums.
Beautiful. Beautiful. No, well, man, did you have one other thing you or was it just that point? Or it
was pretty much just that point. The only other thing I was going to try to say real quickly is, one of the things that I like about social media is that you're doing this all the time, is, school is expensive enough as it is. You know what I mean? Like sometimes people ask me like, oh, do you have a Patreon, page, or do you do this and that? It's like, I'm sort of slow to get to that, because I feel like so much has been shared with me, and I got so much by watching and listening to other people, that I feel like that's how I want to sort of pass on this, the traditional aspect of it.
Right.
So
beautiful,
that's why, man, I enjoy doing this.
Well, man, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much, George. This has been so informative. Quickly, Rachel, do you have that drum break ready for us? Can we play a little bit of that so we can hear this Shadow Wilson?
Yeah, you got to go to about 2:30. Yeah, go fast forward up to about 2:30. Here we go.
Thank you, Rachel. Wow. Whoa. Okay. So with that said,
That's the
because we'll
one.
be on here another 10 minutes, and then I'll I want to keep my show.
Yeah.
So George, just set up very
Good.
quickly the track that we're getting ready to end the episode with.
I'm
of
actually
yours.
not sure which track it is, but it's from a
Okay.
new release by my good friend, great guitarist here named Kyle Ashey.
Great.
And it's something that just came out on the Cellar Live label, which is a great Corey Weed's label.
Oh yeah.
Out of Vancouver. Yeah.
Great.
So
Okay.
And apparently it's been doing pretty well on the jazz charts, whatever those
Okay.
are. But I'm not sure which track she chose, but it's called 5 Down Blues.
Okay.
And it's just a really nice mix of original tunes. A couple Melvin Ryan tune is on there, and some standards and stuff. So
Great.
yeah.
Rachel, you were gonna tell us the tune you were gonna play.
Yeah, this tune is called 5 Down Blues.
Cool.
Okay, great.
Okay,
so
nice.
so everybody, I want us to put our internet fingers together for George FLUDAS. George, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you. For everybody else, man, this has been a great episode. I'm gonna go back myself and take some notes, and we'll be here again next Wednesday. I'm so excited. I think we're gonna be talking to the great Terrion Gully.
Yeah.
And so I'm excited. But thank you all again. This is From the Drummer's Perspective. Tune in every Wednesday at 5:00. And then George, your Instagram handle is it at George FLUDAS?
Yeah, just my name, George FLUDAS. Yeah.
Great. And mine is obviously Ulysses Owens Jr. _ Please check us out. Send us a DM or send us an email or something. Let us know you checked out this episode. Thank y'all so much, and have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your week and weekend.
Thanks for having me, Ulysses. Great to
Thank
talk
you, George.
Thanks,
you, brother.
Appreciate it.